you've got your other book on the way, because we've
Yeah, man.
been
Yeah.
talking about the your first one, about Kundalini and the Golden Dawn and all that stuff. And
Hmm.
it's such a badass book, man. And today, this conversation, like, we've been wanting to put together this conversation since we first met, and it's one of my favorite topics, and I know it's one of your favorite topics to
Yes,
get
it is.
into.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk mostly about giants, and what are the what is the, to me it's like completely beyond irrefutable evidence. It's like
Yes.
we
Yeah.
have infinitely more evidence of giants than we do dinosaurs. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
Um,
Especially in America, there's been
yeah,
so
yeah,
many excavated bones from mounds all over America.
yeah. And I think the to me the story of giants in America and elsewhere is super cool, because like throughout mythology and religions the world over, you have stories of these giant humanoid beings, and sometimes they were like the royal family, and they were the ones who were ruling over everybody. They were the ruling class, and
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes, like in the Native American myths, which I've always been in love with, the a lot of times the giants can be wonderful, benevolent tribal people that sort
Hmm.
of live not usually alongside the Native Americans. They usually lived like far away, but they would intermingle sometimes. They would
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
a small hunting troop of these giants would show up at a Native American village, and they would be nice and
Yeah.
benevolent, and they would teach them other hunting techniques, or they would hang out with them and bring them food and stuff. But they always, they were these huge. And when I say giants, I mean these things were twice, two, and three times the size of a
Yeah.
normal man.
They were between 12 to average 12 to 14 feet tall.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that those may be the same kinds of giants that the Native Americans talk about as like their hero twin saga. The mythology of the hero twins that pops up
Hmm.
all over the place. You always have these like Native American stories about these giants that were big and tall and all that. What I think is interesting, well, I don't want to get into that too much yet specifically, but the Native Americans have their stories of giants. Some of them are benevolent, some of them are cool, and some of them were like these sort of Grendel from Beowulf,
Yeah. And they would eat humans.
they would eat humans.
And
They were
that
they were
connects to the Old Testament, where I mean, it all connects back to the Nephilim, and then connects back to the Watchers, and then you can reference that with the Anunnaki, who were the giants originally, and they were allegedly the sons of the Anunnaki, of the Watchers, and so they had some of that extraterrestrial gene in them, and they were, you know, I mean, we can get into that whole story, but it's very interesting how there's religious references as well as historical finds, archaeological finds, as well as
well, there's
mythologies, and
yeah,
yeah.
mythologies, and one of the things I used to be fascinated with, just like I know a lot of us nerdy history students like to spend hours late into the night scouring Google Earth for anomalies and crazy stuff to look at. But I also used to do that with newspaper archives from around the country,
Yeah.
from all over America, from like the 1860s through the 1940s, whatever. And you would just go look up any town you want and just like Google Tombstone, Arizona newspaper archives, 1800s. And there'll
Yeah.
be like a newspaper archive that comes up, and you can catch the microfilm that's been digitized. And I shit you not, man, there are thousands of stories across the country
Mm,
of these
mm.
giants that were dug up as people were moving west, as settlers were moving west during the gold rush, and just during the settling of the Americas, the resettling of the the colonization of the Americas, right?
Yeah, yeah. They're
Uh,
definitely ancient. They come from ancient times, and they're
yeah.
connected with all of these ancient tribes, the native tribes and stuff here in America, but then also, Middle East with all of these ancient civilizations. So
So
there's that connection.
So the kind of the story of today is giants. The evidence for giants, the reason why it matters if there were giants. I mean, like, to me, it's infinitely more important and more relevant the to mankind to know and to understand the truth about giants
Hmm.
versus like something like dinosaurs. And I kind of keep comparing them to dinosaurs, and I don't have a problem with
Because they're
dinosaurs.
ancient, right? And
I
they're,
love
yeah.
dinosaurs, but they got very little to do with us.
No, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
these giants are extremely recent
Yes.
relative to a dinosaur. They also, it's pretty easy to imagine that they are probably our ancestors to some degree or another.
Yeah,
Um,
there's that connection.
yeah, and so we're going to talk about all that stuff today, and then also you and I, we sort of have this bone to pick with each other that you're going to make the case to me that that these things were the Nephilim, they were the Anunnaki, they were the
Yes.
Watchers of
Okay.
the Book of Enoch and all that stuff, which I'm down with all of that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'm actually not even against your idea that they were our creators. I'm curious to see if in the
Well, I
course
wouldn't
of this
say that they were the creators. They're connected to the creators.
okay,
They're the sons of the creators. So
okay,
according to the Old Testament, they're the sons of the gods, and the gods are our creators. And so according to the Book of Enoch and the Book of the Watchers, these guys who were they were watchers over humanity, and they were some claim extraterrestrial beings that took part in our creation, and some of them rebelled, and 200 of them, led by this is all from the Book of Enoch, led by one angel. Now the idea of them being angels, which means that they had the ability to fly, but that angel could be really a word for extraterrestrial, and so 200 of them, led by an angel named Samyaza, came down to Mount Hermon, and they made a pact between themselves to each of them take a human wife and to make children. And the product of these sexual encounters were these giants called the Nephilim from the Bible. And then what happened afterwards? These the Watchers, the fallen angels, the 200 of these Watchers, they were worshipped by the humans as pagan gods, while the giants they created the line of god kings, right? Because when you go back to these ancient civilizations, you go to Sumeria and you go to Egypt, especially, you have the pharaonic line, which talks about the god kings. So essentially, the first kings were gods. So there's that connection. Now, the question is, who were the gods? Were they some ethereal beings, or were they actual physical flesh and blood beings who were of extraterrestrial origin that were regarded by the humans to be superior in every way? And also, there's that connection that they were our creators. So we revered them, we learned from them, we got technology, mathematics, astronomy, all these advancements, and how to start a civilization. We got all of that, and the giants are connected to that whole story because they were there from the primeval times. But there's an actual timeline of when this apparently happened, and I'm working on a book called Cosmic Star Child, talking about, because as you know, I've been doing a lot of traveling to these different places. Egypt, Peru, Greece. Just really looking into these ancient
yeah. I want to
civilizations.
I want to say that just for the audience. I mean, you've actually been walking the walk. I mean,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not
I
just
really have.
you're
Yeah.
not just sitting around reading books about this stuff. You've
No,
traveled all
no.
over the world. You've been to Sacsayhuaman. You've been to
Mm,
Ollantaytambo. You've been to Egypt. You've been to Machu Picchu. You're going to these places. You're seeing the evidence yourself, and
yeah.
the megalithic evidence, the big stonework, to me is
Dude, that's right there is the smoking gun, is
yeah.
like there's no way that sucks like woman. Take that. I love that example because it's an example of massive megalithic structure. But it's also an example of some kind of technology that was used to make the stone pliable and malleable so that it's like Play-Doh. Because these giant 100-ton blocks stacked one on top of the other, they're so perfectly stacked that you can't slip like a hair in between them, and that's impossible, man. That's impossible to do by today's standards and today's technology, to cut it so perfectly. Even laser cutting can't achieve that. It's impossible, and you can tell that there was some kind of, not only were there possibly the hand of when you look at Stonehenge, right? There's a I was in Stonehenge last year, and I heard that there's like a tale between the people that live in that area. They talk about how Stonehenge was built, and they say that it was actually built with the help of giants. And when you look at these stone blocks, because what I did is I also spun around to Avebury Circle, which is like really nearby Stonehenge. And that whole area, there's all these massive megalithic blocks that are just like stacked. So you have Stonehenge, which is actually stacked in a nice little architectural example of, it's got some astronomical value to it as well. But then you have, Avebury Circle, which is these like massive stone blocks. And the way that they're stacked, it's like it would be impossible unless you're some giant being that can literally pick this thing up and position it so that it's sitting on its end and just using like the force of gravity to balance itself. But over these past thousands of years that this thing has been sitting there, no wind and all these different natural elements, nothing has moved it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty mind blowing. Yeah, I love Sacsayhuaman. To me is the best example, irrefutable evidence of ancient technology that was used to make the stones pliable, malleable, but also to lift them and put them in place. And also, and what's interesting is Sacsayhuaman, the way that these structures are built. So like Machu Picchu, right? When I was in Machu Picchu, one thing that's very apparent is you have what the Incas built, and that's the stuff that's built on top of this existing structure. All these like lower foundation walls of Machu Picchu are those exact type of architecture and those types of stone blocks, that construction. And then you have what the Incas built on top of that with chisels and stones and using mortar to bind it, right? Because there's no mortar in Sacsayhuaman. That's
So
what's crazy about it.
let me just clarify for some of the audience who may not know what we're talking about. So what we're saying is that there are sites all over the world that are built of ginormous stones, and this is called megalithic architecture. And these are giant stones that were used to build these things. And so a lot of people don't realize just how huge, like the stones that were used to build the pyramids, like those are huge stones.
Yeah,
But there are sites around the world that are
way bigger stones.
way bigger stones than that. And these things are many times, this is like a few Greyhound buses if you squished them together and turned them into a stone the size of half a house. And so there are these structures built all over the world. And so the one we're talking about is called Sacsayhuaman, and it's Sacsayhuaman, and that's in Cusco, and that's in Peru. And just go look at this place, and it's one of the most bizarre structures you can imagine. And it's one of
massive wall,
just massive walls of these stones that are completely asymmetrical. They're not congruent at all. They're all shaped differently, and it's like a bunch of just random shaped things, but they fit together perfectly without any mortar, without anything in between them. You can't fit a razor blade or a sheet of paper between them. And you find this same kind of architecture all over the highlands of Peru, but even in Egypt and even in India and other places, you find this same kind of architecture. And I think the argument that is made, that I think Nevin and I would both agree on, is that when you compare not just the architecture itself, but the mythology and the history around it from the local people, and all the stories of it and the religions that have spun their way down throughout history, it seems to point to the idea that these structures were built by what they would call the gods or whatever.
Yes.
And they were in pretty much every single case around the world, these beings are described as being ginormous, being huge, 14 foot.
And also just having technology that we don't even have today. And there's that type of construction. If you go to Easter Island, on one side of the island, you have that exact same type of construction. Then even if you go to Egypt and the entrance to the Sphinx, I was blown away. I went 2 years ago to Egypt, and I saw these massive stones about the size of the stones that the Great Pyramids built, even bigger, and they're stacked on top of one another. And again, it's the same thing. And one thing that's common, it seems like all these civilizations from Egypt to Peru and onwards, they saw these existing stones, which are way older, and they built their monuments on top of these stones, because that's what Machu Picchu is. That's what even the Sphinx, where it's like the entrance towards it, is built. Even the Temple of Abydos, which is, again, these massive megalithic blocks, which is like right by the Great Pyramid. And it's all over the world. I mean, if you just type in, that type of architecture, you put it into Google, and you'll find examples all over the world. And it's usually like all these ancient civilizations, they all have some example of it. In other words, I think what they recognize the existence of the gods, whatever the gods meant to them, and they built on top of these sites because they considered them sacred.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest example of it is actually in Baalbek, Lebanon, and the stones. These are the biggest stones in the world. They're 1,500 tons, and they're projected from the ground 50 feet up, and they're stacked on a row. And right now, it's there was like various temples that were built on top of this, and on Baalbek, from the Rome to now I think is the Temple of Jupiter from the Roman times, and they all considered it sacred. And but it's impossible, 50 feet up. How do you project the stone? How do you lift it? It's like, how would humans accomplish something like that? A 1,500 ton stone,
Yeah, I
perfectly.
saw somewhere like they did a test and they somebody, I think Chris Dunn, one of these guys,
Mhm.
I think did an experiment or just made some phone calls and like did some research and found the biggest crane in the world that we currently have, like the biggest
Yeah.
crane that there is, and it's made to lift the biggest things that we have. And when you see this crane, you can Google largest crane in the world. Let me just do that real quick since I'm here. So largest crane in the world. And if you look at this thing, it's an absolute construct. I mean, this thing it looks like the Golden Gate Bridge itself. That's what this crane looks like. And the maximum like payload capacity for that thing is slightly smaller than any of the stones at Baalbek that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like it'll carry like 11 or 1,200 tons, and there's a couple of 12 and 1,500 ton stones out at Baalbek. So it's like literally we don't have a crane big enough to lift this stuff, and these
Even
guys
today,
are stacking them on top of each other thousands of years later.
Yeah.
So that's all great, and everybody should go look at megalithic architecture and just kind of follow that rabbit hole, and we could definitely get into that later. There's a lot of good places to find information on megaliths. Most people know Graham Hancock and Robert Schoch and John Anthony West and all the usual suspects, Randall Carlson. But I want to talk to you about giants because we agree on pretty much everything. The one thing we've talked about jokingly is like you got to make me a believer on this extraterrestrial thing because I'm not in that community. I for me, when I think about when we talked about this in a different conversation, but to me when I hear stories about us coming from the gods or the gods creating us, I always saw it as like some monkey ate a mushroom while he was evolving on the African savannah and it woke up DNA in his brain and he connected to some archetypal consciousness outside of our normal sphere, and it imbued the monkey or the ape or whatever, the chimp, with more human higher thought and feelings and whatever, and that's how our sort of leap forward in evolution took place a few 100,000 years ago. And from that, all these other mythologies and stuff kind of naturally create themselves because of the fractal nature of the universe. And that may not make sense to some people. It will to some people. But anyway, I never really, when I first heard the like Eric von Daniken and all those guys, I was like, this sounds really cool. The idea that there's Nibiru and there's Sumerian gods and all this stuff. But man, I'll be honest, there's a lot of fuckery that goes on with Eric von Daniken and those guys. A lot of leaps that they make when
there's
they look
a lot
at
of leaps, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're I watch Ancient Aliens. I love the show, but I make the distinction between when they're talking about existing things and credible arguments and when they just go off the rocker and you could tell somebody like passed them a dube and they just went fucking to next level. Oh, and then all of a sudden there's a spaceship there. No. But they're the examination of the existing evidence and the connection with aliens and Eric von Daniken and Chariots of the Gods and honestly, like when I really got into this heavily about 3 years ago, which is kind of when my one part of my journey ended, and then I got onto this journey. That's when I started visiting like heavily 2 times a year, visiting all these places in the world, and getting into Ancient Aliens and shows on lots of ancient civilization shows on Gaia that I watch and stuff, and just reading these books. Got a whole bunch back there, but then seeing the evidence in real life, and then also referencing the stuff that we all No, the stuff from the Old Testament, you know, the Nephilim, the giants, the Watchers, the Book of Enoch. Why was the Book of Enoch taken out? Because it used to be a part of the
So
Bible, then
let's
it was
talk
taken
about
out.
that. So for a lot of
Sure.
people who don't know, the Book of Enoch, that's one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, or is that Nag Hammadi?
It's one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's an apocryphal book from the Bible. So, in other words, prior to it was 325 that the Emperor Constantine had a Council of Nicaea, and they basically it was all these Christian sects, and he wanted to unify all of them. And to do that, they also had to go through what was in the Bible at the time, and they took some things and they got rid of some other things. And I think that's where the political parts, you know, how Christianity's been used for political purposes, and you have the Crusades and the Dark Ages and all that, and reforming everything to Christianity, destroying these old civilizations in the Americas and stuff. Um, it all kind of started there, you know, the political aspect of it, and it came from a big part of it was taking out the Book of Enoch because Jesus used to quote the Book of Enoch, and because to him it was a very relevant part of our history. And the Book of Enoch, the main parts of the Book of Enoch, talks about the Watchers, and it talks about the fallen angels, which, like I said, is these 200 rebelling Watchers who rebelled, who came down to Earth to have
Who did
sex
they
with human
rebel
women.
against?
So they rebelled against the other Watchers, you know, the ones who were in charge of us. And now you can make the comparison and the argument that we really had a council of gods or extraterrestrials that, if we look at the oldest records we have, the Sumerian records, these were the Sumerian gods. So you had Enki, the good guy, the serpent from the Garden of Eden, and you had Enlil, the bad guy, the one who created humans originally to be slaves, right? For us to mine for gold. And now you can make the connection with Zechariah Sitchin's work, you know, who did translate the cuneiform tablets, which is where we get all of these information from. That's the Sumerian tablets, where it talks about this, the first mention of the Garden of Eden, you know, and the Noah's flood, you know, under a different name there, way before the actual Old Testament was developed, you know. And so these guys talk about a time when these gods came down to earth and they needed to mine for gold.
Where'd they come from? They come from Nibiru.
Well, that's what Zechariah Sitchin says. The 12th planet Nibiru. There's like one of these plaques that has actually shows our solar system, which is pretty mind blowing. Like, how did they actually know all of these different planets? And then they included the moon and the sun as planets as well. And then there was this 13th planet or 12th. I'm not sure. The 12th planet.
Well,
And it would be Nibiru. And the idea is that Nibiru has an irregular elliptical orbit, and then it spins around and every 3,600 years, and it comes close to Earth, and then it's part of our solar system, but not. Now, this part I used to believe, and I was like all into it during 2012 because that spelled the coming back of Nibiru and the gods, and the end of the Mayan calendar, which would be the end of the world. None of that stuff happened, so there's no real physical evidence of Nibiru, but there is evidence of according to the cuneiform tablets, there is evidence of these gods coming down, taking part in creating humankind. The date would be, according to the tablets, 250,000 years ago, whereas they came here 450,000 years ago. And so they developed man, and they created man by splicing their genes with the Homo erectus, who was like the ancestor of the Neanderthal man. And then you had side by side living the Homo erectus with the modern anatomic human, and then the Homo erectus evolved into Neanderthal man. Humans stayed the same, But then we had different modifications that were done to us, apparently by Enki, by the gods, that allowed us to tap into our DNA. And what's interesting is that there's what's called a human chromosome number 2, which looks to be a result of an ancient fusion that took place. It's the one chromosome that separates us from any other living being on the planet. And it basically is, scientists are saying, this is actual scientific evidence, that's the chromosome that gives us intelligence. And that's why we're constantly advancing technologically, scientifically, in all these various ways, whereas all the other animals, because we are part animal, all the other animals are the same, right? We eat, sleep, shit, fuck. We do that the same as the other animals, but what we have intelligence. We have nu, right? As we talked last time from
Yeah.
Hermeticism. We have the mind with the capacity to
The
think and
logos.
abstract. The logos, the word, right? It's the word of God. Why? Because we are gods. We're part gods. We have the soul. Our soul is divine. Why? And so that's something, then going back, that's something that was given to us by these extraterrestrial beings. Now, you can make the claim to say these extraterrestrial beings, were they physical beings or ethereal beings? Like, and there's all kinds of theories, right? Maybe they, phase in and out of reality. They're at a different frequency of vibration, but they take part in our reality. They affect us through the mind and all this different stuff. You can make all kinds of arguments. But the argument I like to make is that, okay, so these giants, we have physical evidence of them. And so these giants, according to the book of Enoch, were the sons of God and the daughters of, and the sons of the gods and the daughters of men. And so these giants were massive beings that had to have been created by physical reproduction. In other words, how could an ethereal being impregnate a physical being? It's impossible. So they had to have been physical beings, and that's how they created the physical giants. And so to me, that's irrefutable evidence that these giants didn't just come out of nowhere. Something created them. And there's so many stories from all ancient traditions, mythologies, religions. They all talk about these giants, their existence. We have all these monuments.
They're all over the Old Testament too, by the way.
All over.
They're all over the Old Testament. Yeah. I can't remember the verses off the top of my head, but they're like just, I don't know, there's dozens of verses if you go read through the Old Testament about these giants in the land of Canaan and how they were,
yes.
Goliath was just one of them that everyone's heard about, was the story of David and Goliath. But it's easy to dismiss that if you think that like David and Goliath is the only story in the Old Testament that mentions a giant. It's not. There's dozens and dozens of accounts of the entire people of, I think it was Canaan.
The Canaanites were either part Neanderthal or there were also giants to some extent.
Yep, 100%. And then there's stories of these giants having 6 fingers on each hand.
Yes.
Which is really fascinating because we took the kids to Yellowstone a couple years ago on our yearly big road trip that we do. And on our way there and back, every year wherever we go, we always stop at every like native site that we can, talk to the native people whenever we can, get stories and buy the books you can't get anywhere else and see the sites. And we climbed up this cliff up in Vernal, Utah. It's on private property. And we had permission. And we went up this cliff, and there are not cave paintings, but cliff paintings all over the sides of these cliffs, way, way, way up, overlooking this huge valley. And it's just amazing to see all of the things and the people that are depicted there. Right. And it was my 9-year-old who was then probably 7, I think, who he yelled at me and he goes, "Dad, come over here and look at this." And we see there's these giants that are painted up there, and they have 6 fingers on each hand, and they're twice as tall as the people they're standing next to.
Right.
And it's just it's bizarre. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Because the proof is everywhere.
Right there.
It's the stories. It's in the pictographs. It's in the religious texts of the Jews and the Christians, and it's in the fossil record. So like one of the things I wanted to talk about was I grew up sort of in like Rockwall, Texas area, and that's a town near Dallas. And there's a show called America Unearthed, and they did we put together an episode of America Unearthed where we dug up this rock wall that's here in Texas. And we've dug this thing up before, and there's a friend of mine named Kevin Richardson that did the excavations, and we've had Eric Von Doniken's been to the wall. We have a lot of college professors from like University of Texas come out, University of North Texas, UTD, UTA, all that stuff. They come out and they look at this. They do paleomagnetic dating. They do archaeological stuff, so geology, archaeology, anthropologists. All these people coming out and looking at this giant wall. What made it onto TV was not the story that was not the conversation taking place.
There's a cover-up. There's a cover-up taking place behind their existence.
Yeah. And I grew up knowing that this wall was the reason why the town of Rockwall was named Rockwall. But what I didn't know until 10, 12 years ago was doing some research on the giant thing and found some old newspapers from Rockwall, the city of Rockwall, from like the 1860s, 1870s when it was first being settled. And what they found was they were digging digging wells out here when they were settling, and they dug down and they hit a rock, and then they tried to dig around it, and they were like, we can't dig around it, it's too big, it's too big, it's too big. So they finally tapped it, and it felt hollow. So they busted through this rock, and they found this huge underground chamber with giant polished columns.
Wow.
And there were these polished columns that went all the way to the top of this huge chamber. It was like 60 feet deep. It was massive.
Wow.
They lowered a slave down inside of the or a servant down into the chamber, and he looked around, and they found a bed that was 16 feet long.
Oh.
They found an old dilapidated battle axe that was like 8 feet long, or an old wood chopping axe or whatever. And there's a whole series in this old microfilm of like the Rockwall Sun or whatever that newspaper was called from the 1860s, where they went back in there the next week, and there was an update in the newspaper about it. And there's all of this, and nowadays, you can't even get people, certified like professors and academics and stuff who will have these conversations and talk about this, what they found.
Right. They don't want to.
You can't get them to say it on the camera because they don't want to lose their job.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that there's been a taboo created in society by the scholars about the existence of the giants. Why? Because it completely changes human history, right? It changes the religious books. It changes us coming from, God, and changes Christianity, changes all these different religious books of where we come from, who our ancestors are, and all of that. And that's why, it would be too much work and too much political implications to have to rewrite all of that. So what do? They cover it up, right? The Smithsonian's involved very much in the covering up of these giant remains, which, like you said, there's thousands, and especially in the old clippings of articles, when you research at that level, you can find all of it. I ordered a book the other day, literally giant book, 600 pages, clippings and articles from, back in the day, of thousands of examples of giants being uncovered, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's hard to control people whenever they know that they're descended from giants.
Yeah. Because the question is like, okay, how does this fit into history? Who are the giants? How are we related to them, right? Because I think what's happening is that the giants, they are our connection to something that they don't want us to know, and that's our true origins, which, like I say, is extraterrestrial. And I know I'm not gonna convince you in 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. It took me a long time to get convinced of just looking, following the rabbit hole, and
I just want to know where they come from, and I just want to see the evidence for it. Make me a believer. I'm open-minded.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, through our conversations, my mind's there, right? Like, this is what's on my mind all the time, and I'm convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt. Now, I don't know, I don't have all the details, and keep in mind, I've been on this journey for 3 years. When we have this same conversation 2 years from now, when I really work through my book, which is, I'm working on a book concerning this stuff, I'll be even clearer and be able to explain better the situation. Right now, I'm okay, but there's still a lot out there I'm trying to figure out. Right?
Do you think that the giants were like? Do you think that the Atlanteans were giants?
Good question. Yeah. So let's go there, definitely, because according to Plato, right? Plato says in Critias and Timaeus, his two main books, he says that the Noah's flood event happened to destroy the Atlanteans, and the Atlanteans were under they were under Poseidon's rule, and Zeus came by. Zeus is the one who destroyed Atlantis and sunk Atlantis, right? And his date, 9500 BC, is the same date that they give for what's called the Younger Dryas event that happened, which is 11,500 years ago. We were still kind of in an ice age, and then something happened. They think either a solar flare or a comet burst, and all of a sudden, it hit the Earth, and it created, this greenhouse effect, which melted the glaciers, and all this water came rushing down, and that's the scientific evidence behind, or scientific claim behind, Noah's flood, which they say is an actual thing that happened, right? And it's the same date, 9500 BC, and then you have connected to that same date. And then you can connect, okay, why, according to the Old Testament, why did God send the flood, right? to kill off the Nephilim, the giants. Why? Because according to the Old Testament, they were eating the humans, and they were ravaging the world. They were, they were beasts. You could never feed them enough. They ate all of our produce, and also they released all this stuff to humanity that we shouldn't have known, and stuff that, like, wars were created because they taught us how to fight. They gave us weapons, and all of a sudden the whole world, and it's the Sodom of Gomorrah story, we were involved in perversion, and we were at war always, and then you had these giants that were fucking eating humans. And so God, according to the Old Testament, created Noah's flood, told Noah, save two of each species, male and female, and so we can continue in the new world, right? But it's interesting, that date, 9500 BC, that's the date that even Göbekli Tepe, right, the world's oldest temple, they say that's when it was built, right? So it was either built and then covered up before the Great Flood to save, and we can get into Göbekli Tepe because that's a really important topic to this whole, not only giants, but ancient civilizations, our history, religion, spirituality. It all connects to that, and also the Atlanteans, because there was a source of spirituality, a source of wisdom for us, and according to Plato, that was the Atlantis and the Atlanteans. And according to Madame Blavatsky, the Atlantean may have been the Cro-Magnon man, and we talked about that last time.
Yeah, I think so. I get down with that idea. If anyone who's ever looked at the Cro-Magnon man, when we hear that term, we tend to think like Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon man, different. Same thing. Like they were just some big dumb apes that slapped their hand on a cave wall, Yeah. But now scientists are starting to really seriously consider that the Cro-Magnon men, first of all, they have a much larger cranial cavity than we do.
They're taller. They're taller than us.
They're taller. They were bigger,
bone
stronger, more athletic, more bone density. They were giant superhumans, and they were way bigger cranial capacity, stronger jaw lines. But they would have looked a lot more like us than like the Neanderthal, who we think of looking like, Barney from The Simpsons, like sloped forehead, really not a very human-like thing. But Cro-Magnon men could have been beautiful. Think of them as like sort of giant
they look like
Viking.
Ice. They're just giant. Imagine us just blowing us up by 200%. We would be 12 feet tall, look the same, still look. Everything would be the same. We would just be substantially taller, bigger brains, which means more intellect, right? More intelligence. And what's interesting, I actually just kind of found this information the other day. They say that the Cro-Magnon man came upon the Earth 35,000. He lived from 35,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago. And what's interesting is that date is what the Enochian records say when the giants were created, when the Watchers or the fallen angels had sex with human women. They say it's 35,000 years ago. And then what's interesting, that's crazy.
Where's that information?
That's it's in the Enochian records, so in the Book of Enoch.
Oh, that's in the Book of Enoch.
In the Book of Enoch, yeah. Okay. And what's interesting, and what's also interesting to add to that, you have this time in the world called Zep Tepi. I don't know if you heard of it.
Yeah, the before time.
Before time, when, according to Egyptian records, when the gods lived with the humans, and their date when Zep Tepi started,
35,000 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Egyptians.
Is that a coincidence?
That's crazy. I never thought about that. I had heard before that the Cro-Magnon men showed up like 40,000 years ago. Yeah. I wasn't thinking about the fact that like some people that I consider to be pretty reputable, like Robert Schoch and John Anthony West, who's no longer with us, they've said for a long time that they think that some of the constructions in Egypt are most likely 35 or so thousand years old. And the Egyptians' kings list, which is written on a temple wall, I forget which one, and you might know. But
I'm not sure either. Yeah, but there's
an Egyptian kings list written on this whole temple wall, and they'll show it to you when you take a tour of Egypt, and they'll show you the Egyptians kings list. But what they won't show you is that the opposite wall has a whole other list of kings that existed during Zep Tepi. Who were the gods?
They were the gods. You had Thoth, Horus, Osiris. They were all apparently on Earth as our god kings.
And that lineage goes back again 35,000 years.
Yeah, so you see three connections there. You got Book of Enoch, you got the Egyptian Kings list, and then
Modern
you have the
archaeology.
modern archaeology, right? And
Yeah,
like, what is that, a coincidence, right? Like, come on,
yeah, it is interesting. So, do you think that like Osiris and a lot of those Egyptian gods were they real people, like real flesh and blood things?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They were flesh and blood aliens. And what's interesting
So you think
about them,
Osiris was an alien? So was he?
yeah.
Would you say
Well,
that
he's from
Osiris?
Sirius. He's from Sirius,
So
right?
talk about that because that's the stuff I'm
Sure.
interested to learn that I don't know. Is like what is
Okay.
because I always wonder where they're from because the
Yeah.
evidence I see on ancient aliens and stuff from like for them being on this planet that comes around every 3,600 years,
Yeah, no, I'm not
I don't
feeling
buy
that
it.
theory at all. Yeah,
But I'm
yeah.
I'm I'm very interested in. Look, here's the thing. I'm a big believer in astrology. Not a believer, I understand it. So once you understand astrology, it's not to be believed, it's to be understood. And so I get it. The stars are important and they're special, and people have connections to the constellations, and different people connect with different star systems. And there's a reality to that. There's also a reality to the fact that the smartest people in human history that we have record of, the Egyptians, built the most impressive things in human history, and they were aligned to the stars,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
appeared to venerate and appeared to be in some ways gateways to these different star
Yes.
systems and
Yeah.
stuff. And the Great Pyramid in particular points at Orion, or what they would
Ryan's
have
belt.
called
Yeah.
Osiris. And I think there's a shaft or something in the King's Chamber that points at
It
Sirius or
points
what.
straight to to Sirius.
So anyway, so that's sort of that's how much I do know and how much I'm on board with. Um, so what I'm really curious about is because I've wondered about this, like Osiris and those guys, were they flesh and blood
Yeah.
aliens or angels or gods or extra dimensional beings that vibrated into this reality in
Well, that's
some
also
way?
a theory. That's also a credible theory as well, right? They could have been multi-dimensional beings that are able to phase in and out of this reality, right? And we could see them. We can see them as physical beings. They appear like that to us, but they're multi-dimensional. So that's a theory as well. But to some extent, they are flesh and blood in the sense that, not in the sense that we can kill them, because there's not really any record of any of them dying. They live for thousands of years,
Right.
right? And even humans, prior to Noah's flood, according to the Old Testament records, humans used to live for hundreds of years, right? And there's a theory behind that. Why did we stop living for so long?
Why do you
I
think?
think well, I think our agriculture has a lot to do with that, because we established agriculture, um, Sumerian times, 5,000 BC. And that's when we established agriculture, and around these different rivers, the Ganges. You have the in India, and in China, Yangtze, and we always establish agriculture around these different major rivers, Tigris, Euphrates, right? But agriculture, grains, because what's interesting is that they haven't found, through fossils, they haven't found any grains prior to 10,000 BC. In other words, it was
Yeah.
just wild,
Right.
wild. Yeah. So the actual grains, they say, it's a theory, was brought to us by extraterrestrials to help us establish civilization. But for that, we need agriculture. We need to, like, we can't be, nomads. We can't be hunters gatherers, move from one place to the next, kill the animals off, and go to the next place. We got to settle in an area, right? So we needed grains for that. So they brought that here, but at the same time, that also killed off our life cycle. We no longer live for hundreds of years. We now live average 80 years, 90 years, you know?
Yeah, I was always, sort of just speculated that was because the age difference thing was because our environmental conditions maybe became different after one of these cataclysms, particularly maybe the last one at the end of the Younger Dryas.
Mm.
I had a history teacher that was really astute when I was younger, and he mentioned, of course, I don't know the historical evidence for this, but I've come across mentions of stuff like this in different old texts, but the idea that at one point there was a water table around the earth, and
Mm.
that during maybe the last flood, because there have been many, many, many floods,
Yeah, yeah.
according to Plato and the Egyptian priests and stuff, this fire and floods seem to
Yeah, there were
alter.
cataclysmic events,
Yeah, they
from
happen
fire to
cyclically.
flood. Yes, yes.
But this guy mentioned that like there was a water table, and that water table would have filtered out a lot of the sun's the rays that degrade our cells, our cellular structure over time. And what I thought was really fascinating was that movie Noah with Russell Crowe.
I love that.
Love that movie. I bet you love that movie. I love it so much. We watch it all the time. You know, and in that movie, you'll notice at one point when he looks up at the sky,
the water comes from the ground.
Well, I'm saying when he looks up at the sky, there's twinkling up in the sky during the daytime everywhere, and it's clear that there's water up there. You know what I mean? So it was what my history teacher told me 20-something years ago. You know, they make this movie that has a lot of Gnostic or esoteric or apocryphal knowledge in it. The Watchers and all that stuff. And then here's this water table up there. You know, because one of the things is that like barometric pressure has a lot to do with how we age and how we heal and how our cells rejuvenate. So like if someone's got certain problems, they'll stick them in a barometric chamber, and that additional air pressure and whatever else, it rapidly or massively enhances cellular regeneration in pretty much every area of the body. And so there was this sort of, I can't remember if it was Stan Deo or one of these really out there intelligent guys that was talking about the barometric pressure of the Earth was different thousands of years ago. Gravity was less, a long time ago, which is why you have dinosaurs that were
massive,
so massive, and like things like the Brontosaurus, when you look at their head and their neck and their body, they couldn't exist nowadays because gravity would make them, their head would just
break his neck.
They'd break their neck. They couldn't do it. So anyway, there's I think a lot of evidence that there's, or at least some evidence that the environmental conditions, the barometric conditions changed, and we no longer, it's like we have back problems. We're the only animal in the world that has fucking, random, biomechanical problems with our body just falling apart because we're not built for this gravitational state.
Well, some say, I mean, there's theories also that we we come from Mars, and that actually we are built for Mars, that we're not built for here, and that's part of the reason why we have all of these physical issues that we develop over time and stuff. And theory, right? A lot of these are theories, right? Like we can spin off different theories here and there, but sadly we can't prove any of this, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just fun to kick around as long as there's some kind of evidence to talk about. You know what I mean? Everybody's got ideas about shit, but like I'm really interested in the things that there's, of
course, actual evidence.
Some kind of evidence, even if it's whatever. But I think it's interesting because there's a lot of crazy stories about the giants, and I think that they there's our connection to them. You said it earlier, like really the best way is like to understand that there are giants and that we're connected to them is then to investigate further. Yeah. And that's the thing that certainly, if you were in control of this planet and the religious structures and the political structures,
it's not a good idea.
The financial structures, the last thing you want people realizing is that they're descended from giants who are descended from gods, and that spark of divinity is within each one of us, and that we don't need them to gain access to it. So like, really suppressing Atlantis and suppressing giants, I realized at a point that had to be the most important thing that the Pope and that the banking,
they don't want us to know.
It's the biggest thing that they can't let happen. Have you ever heard of and I think that this would probably jive with a lot of what you believe, but this is sort of new information to me. Have you ever heard of a guy named Michael Tessarian?
Yeah, I've heard of him. He's one of the first ones to come out with some of these theories, as far as I know.
Yeah, he's an Irish researcher guy. He's been doing this for like 30 years, but he's like a master of the occult. You'd really dig him. But he has this sort of, he's kind of like Graham Hancock. He syndicates a lot of different research.
He's got the occult knowledge to add to, and that's very important.
Yeah. But his understanding of occult and astrology and like tarot and that stuff, particularly all those occult ceremonial things of like the old families and stuff like that. His is probably the greatest of anyone I've seen. Like he's friends with Jordan Maxwell, and of course Jordan Maxwell was one of Manly P. Hall's students, and he's very much of that occult Manly P. Hall sort of thing. But anyway, what Tessarian like the fundamental belief about Tessarian's like worldview is that we didn't come from Africa. Humans didn't come from
Yeah,
Africa,
yeah, yeah.
and that in his view, Ireland is like sort of the origin of civilization, and
Okay.
I would sort of bypass that and say that.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before. Okay.
Yeah, he's got a book called The Irish Origins of Civilization. This dude writes like 800-page books with 300 pages of footnotes, and like
Right.
he really
Yeah,
gets
that's
it.
serious research.
But a serious guy. But I also think there's a lot of Irish bias going on there with him.
Sounds
Uh,
like it. Yeah.
but my point is, all you got to do is read all of his stuff and absorb it because it's all good, and then just take it the next step further. And it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Ireland was just an outpost of Atlantis. Atlantis was a giant continent that was in the middle of the Atlantic.
Well,
That
yeah.
there's
It would
pyramids.
be current Antarctica if we had to locate, the most credible theory about Atlantis is that Atlantis was current Antarctica. And that's why right now, there's so many things that are being discovered in Antarctica, and apparently there's like massive projects going on there, and we can even get into like, space Nazis and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
them establishing bases there, and you have the secret space programs that are doing research. There's all kinds of land, like spaceships, 3 mile long spaceships. There's a few that were uncovered that are under the ice, and some are apparently even peering out, so you can see it in Google Earth. And they have to, every now and then they gotta, as the ice is receding, and you're seeing more of these structures from like pyramids out there to, to technological things like actual spaceships. They gotta constantly, NASA has to constantly like update things, and so because they don't want people knowing this information.
Yeah.
But apparently, Atlantis was in Antarctica, and at one point in time, it was like rich with, it was a tropical weather, and it was literally the opposite of what it is now.
Yeah. There's some people think that there's still there's still civilizations that exist there under the ice,
Oh yeah.
and some sort of
Oh yeah, bro.
tropical conditions that have existed in these sort of ice domes and stuff. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. If you look at the science of Antarctica, it's not clear to me that this place is completely a barren wasteland.
No,
You
no.
know, and
More and more evidence, daily coming out about it. And apparently, Antarctica is also there's a massive hole. There's a massive, literally entryway into. Now, if you we should get
Here we
into
go.
the inner caverns of the Earth, the inner Earth. This is where the giants went. If you want to find giants now, you're going to find them there. You're not going to find them on the surface of the planet because they've been killed off, right? And after the flood, they all went inside the earth to live there. And a lot of these native tribes, they have stories, mythologies. The Makushi tribe talking about going into the inner earth and finding these giants who literally had like a whole world carved
Yeah.
out inside there, that they had their own like artificial sun that they had. They had,
Mhm.
everything was giant, right? Like their grapes are massive, their apples are massive, everything's giant. It's very interesting, and this is all part of mythology and also part of what people are saying they're discovering now. Yeah.
Yeah. The Native Americans all over the place have stories of giants in caves. Where they would go down deep into the earth, like Mount Shasta, particularly, is a very
Yes.
special place. There's a mountain in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I've
Mhm.
been there, and I didn't even know that it was a thing when I was there. And then, like, literally on the other end of my road trip, I was reading about that mountain, and I was like, shit, I missed it. I didn't even go in there and check it out. But
So
there's a
exciting to see these places, eh?
it's so exciting to go see them.
Yeah.
But inside like that mountain, again, there are newspaper articles from the 1870s where like gold miners in Flagstaff were encountering these giant fucking monster things,
Right.
and they were coming up missing, and you'd have 14 miners go in there, and 6 of them come running out
Yeah.
screaming and talking about a giant thing.
Yeah.
And then you go read the Native American mythology that dates back hundreds and thousands of years earlier, and they're telling the same stories about that same mountain, about those same places, Mount Shasta and Flagstaff and Pyramid Lake in Nevada. I think there are these places where there's caves, there are monsters, and there are newspaper articles that match up with 100 or 1,000-year-old Native American stories.
Right. Right.
So I think you're right. I'm a big believer that the Earth is very spongy,
Yes,
Um,
yeah. It's
you know,
apparently like catacombs.
it's
Apparently
a
they're like catacombs in there. Yeah.
yeah, and even beyond that, the imagery I get with catacombs, even beyond that, like there's that Hang Son Dune cave in Vietnam. Have you seen that? There's
No, I never.
the biggest underground cave they've ever found, and I keep doing this thing just for the audio listeners. I'm sharing my screen with Nevin,
That's
and
pretty cool. I didn't know you could do that.
and
That's pretty awesome.
when I do that, I there we go. All right, can you see it?
I got nothing here.
You got nothing?
No.
What the hell's
I was seeing
happening?
Sacsayhuaman earlier when you were
Oh,
doing
there we
that.
go. Okay.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I don't hopefully this will come through on the YouTube. Um this will come through on the YouTube video.
Yeah. Well, it's on my screen. It's being recorded, so
So
right on. Look
this
at that. That's beautiful.
so this is a beautiful cave. This is the world's largest cave that we've
Holy crap.
discovered so far. And look at this person standing here
Wow.
with this giant cave. And there are look at that little person standing there.
Wow.
And you can fit essentially, okay, if you've ever been to, like, I just think of Dallas, but probably any skyline besides like New York, you can fit a 55-story building in here, and the size of it is basically, this is like downtown Dallas. You could fit all
Holy.
of downtown Dallas inside of this cave. Um, it's a huge cave, and this is just one that some random farmer happened to find on his land. And that's just one cave. The earth is full of these kinds of things.
Phil.
It's
Phil.
absolutely filled with this kind of stuff. And we just kind of scratch the surface, and we don't really ever see things. And I mean, shit, dude, there have been, as you know, like there are pyramids that people are still finding that they thought was a mountain for
Oh, dude. In my
thousands.
in my home country in Bosnia, what about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, guy discovered pyramid structures, and
Yeah,
it is the biggest. I've been there 3 times, and I always go. I'm very excited when I go there. It's definitely a pyramid, man.
yeah,
Right now they've discovered underground tunnels, right? And it's what an ancient pyramid is. It's an energy generating machine. It's a power plant, and that's what essentially the Great Pyramid is. Even though the Pharaoh Khafre
hold on.
decided to.
I
Mhm.
want to stick on the Hollow Earth thing
All
for a minute.
right.
But I'm with you. Yes, the
Yeah,
Bosnian
yeah.
pyramid's a thing. It's a crazy thing. But yes, to your point, we don't know what's going on this planet. We are pretty oblivious. The average person, and even the average scientist, certainly the average history teacher, is completely oblivious to most of this stuff, right? And we don't really know how many caves are inside the Earth. But whenever
And if
you
and if
have,
they did, like, they're not revealing this information. This is going to be, you're not going to get the exact information here. Why? Because there's so much going on in there from, special projects and things like that that they don't want you to know about. This is that like side of the world that most regular people are not going to find on Google.
yeah,
But if you look deep enough, you will find what's going on there.
yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that, and of course, I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but the Admiral Byrd. There's a guy
Yes.
named Admiral Byrd. Did we talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
this? You and I.
No, no, but I know the story
I
very
know
well.
you
Did we
know
we
it,
may have
but
brought to it in Antarctica? You went in with that's where the Nazi
yeah.
the
So in the
aircraft came out.
late 40s, after World War II, an extremely highly decorated Navy admiral with the U.S. military took a whole naval flotilla of ships and stuff, and aircraft carriers and battleships and 4,000 troops. They went down to Antarctica. Like, first of
Yeah.
all, what the hell?
Yeah, why
Why?
even go there, right? Yeah.
4,000 troops and a
Mhm.
whole bunch of ships and battle cruisers and aircraft carriers and all this stuff to Antarctica after
Yeah.
the war, way after the war.
Yeah.
And the story, as it goes, is that they got their butts kicked by some extremely advanced flying
Saucers.
um, saucers. It really was. I mean, they were flying saucers, and
Yeah.
they zipped around so fast. They messed up their whole fleet. They came limping back into South America. I think came back to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or something, to some
Mhm.
military base or whatever that we have down there, because America's got bases everywhere.
Mhm.
But they just came limping back in after getting their butts kicked. And Admiral Byrd said that, what they had encountered down there was was flying ships that were capable of moving from pole to pole in a matter of minutes on the Earth.
Yeah, and
And
spinning, zigzagging, right? That's
yeah, there was
another.
zigzagging
There's a
all over the
special
place.
technology that
Yep.
to be able to do that.
And they threw him into a mental institution. You know.
That's what they do, but that's back then, it wasn't people were still they still had hope in the governments and stuff that the truth would be released. Now, you find if something like that happens to you, you know that you can't go public with that because you know that
Yeah.
it's part of those hidden things that the governments don't want you to know. They don't
Yeah.
want
They're
you to know
gonna
that side of
send
reality.
they're gonna send Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones after you with a little flashlight,
Exactly.
blink
Well,
it
I
in your
mean, that's the Men in
face.
Black, right? Where that's where
Yeah.
the idea came from, the
Yeah. They
majestic
have.
wealth.
I think they have that ability. But yeah, I'm really fascinated with the idea that Antarctica was a part of Atlantis. I think that, like I know some people do, that Atlantis was sort of a widespread culture, a widespread civilization. Like to me, like if you look at the Azores, like a lot of people don't even know where the Azores are, but it's these islands that are like halfway between New York and England in the Atlantic, in the North Atlantic.
Is it Azure Islands or
It's
Azore Islands? Is that how I say
Azores,
it? Azore.
Azores.
Yeah, yeah, okay. They're
Yeah,
islands,
yeah.
right?
And they're beautiful islands. So this is the Hawaii of the Atlantic, is what this is
Oh, okay, okay.
called. It's like the Hawaii of the Atlantic. And like I go back and think of, if I was royalty, if I was some Anunnaki Nephilim royalty, some Atlantean king or the lords and ladies of Atlantis, and I wanted a place to call my home, I would go to the fucking Azores or
That's what
something
they
like
say.
that.
Yeah,
You
yeah. They
know,
say it's possible that Atlantis was in the Azore Islands. Yeah, that's
well,
one other theory.
there's well my what I'm suggesting is that, well, first of all, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is a fact that we can Google right now. But they have found a pyramid off the coast of the Azores in the water.
Yeah,
Um,
is that? I'm not in
here,
terms
I'm
of my
pulling it up. I'll
geography.
show it
I
to
know
you.
they found pyramids like right under Cuba,
Yeah, they
and
found
they're
those
saying
too.
that could have also been Atlantis. And that was some big news years ago, big discovery, and it got covered up, and nothing
Yeah,
came out from it.
that's how it goes. But that's the thing, is that these pyramids, they are in the water off of Cuba and the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I
And
think that's what I am talking about as well.
all right, here we go. We're looking at this pyramid off the Azores. Um, some of these are not real pictures, by the way, if anyone's watching
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
trying to find some real sonar images because they do exist and I've seen them.
It could be that
Um,
you see the columns there. I think that could be real.
this
I
one
think I
here.
saw. Oh no, up here at the Atlantis found question mark. I don't know
Um,
if that's real. I remember seeing
no,
stuff like that.
I don't think so. But here's the Azores. I mean, it's a beautiful volcanic island chain, and here we go. Yeah, this is a sort of a sonar, graphic thing or whatever. But anyway, you can look at it. I did dig into this a bit because I'm real skeptical about this stuff because I get so excited about it that I don't ever want to look stupid by spreading around bullshit. So I did look into this, and it's a thing. It is a thing. There's a real pyramid. They found it. It's about 400 feet deep in the ocean down there, and that's more evidence of you know
To
it's a
support
fucking
our
pyramid in,
claims.
in the in the ocean. Yeah, and then they're
Yeah.
down there off of
Hmm.
Cuba, and then if you look at Edgar Casey talked about there being a hall of records down in the Yucatan. And then what do you find down in the Yucatan? You find pyramids all over the place,
All
feathered
over.
serpent pyramids and stuff. And then there was a book written called Atlantis Under the Ice by a couple of your fellow Canadians.
Oh,
Did you ever read that? It was
no,
it,
no, I've
it,
never heard of
it's
it.
the book that Graham Hancock references often, but it's by a married couple named Rose and Rand Flemath, and
Okay.
they moved to like London or something from Canada, and just to have access to like whatever that big library is there, like the Library of England or whatever the hell it's called. I don't know.
Yeah.
And they just lived in that library basically. They were school teachers or something, and they just took their life savings and they just went and moved into the damn library in London, and they
Yeah.
just studied every book they could find and brought together this evidence that what you're saying, like Atlantis essentially was on Antarctica and that through some sort of crustal displacement, Antarctica shifted
shifting of
down.
the poles.
Yep, the poles flipped, the magnetics got all messed up.
And that ties into that story also that there was a meteor that hit the Earth or something that make it spin off its axis and the poles and shift and crustal displacement to occur. So that would be kind of around that time frame of like 12,000 years ago that the thing sank, which then coincides with Plato, Old Testament, because we don't really know much about Atlantis at all.
No, we really don't. There's I was watching a Stan Deyo video a while back on Instagram. Anybody who wants to look up Stan Deyo, it's Deyo, and this dude has like 10 PhDs in like astrophysics and all kind of crazy stuff, fluid mechanics, and I don't even know what else. But he's done all kinds of like consulting for NASA. He's a very, very credentialed guy. He's also kind of wacky, but he's really, really smart, and he's got crazy ideas to look up. And one of the things he pointed out was that and I'm looking for Google Earth right now, but my brain's not working. One of the ideas he brought up is that like if you go to Google Earth and you look at certain places in the world, you can see on the globe like where a meteor impact was. And if you look at, you can literally see mountain ranges that were pushed up in a big sort of semicircle, and you'll see the land. It's almost like if you threw a baseball into the mud on the beach or something at an angle.
Right.
It just pushes it up. And I do sometimes wonder very much if the reason for these cataclysms, or at least one of them in there somewhere, was a meteor hitting the Earth and doing something like that. And we know with like the Younger Dryas situation that was probably a meteor that hit the ice caps. But my point is, I was trying to find Google Earth and show you. I guess I must have deleted it off here. Anyway, if you look at the southern tip of South America, you can see one of those sort of what looks to me like a meteor crater.
Yeah. Well,
right where Antarctica is.
Is there like on Easter Island or something? I saw it like recently also. There's a massive crater. I think it is on. Oh man, I'd have to look it up.
I don't know.
But yeah. There's
it's a fascinating place.
Craters, all over the place actually.
Place. Yeah. I've looked up some things on Google Earth, and you can see like there's some crazy, for lack of a better word, it almost looks like an airport hangar exit hole that comes out of the ice in Antarctica, and there's
that's what I was referring to, the big hole.
There's like dozens of them, and they're like these big holes, and I use my little Google Earth measuring tool, and they're like 300 feet across, but they're like polished perfectly, like semicircle with a flat bottom, and there's quite a few of them. Let me see.
And you're not allowed to fly there. You're not allowed to fly there. That's whenever they're doing expeditions in Antarctica, they're strictly told never to fly there. And the one or two people that did, they said exactly what we're saying. The massive holes, and they lead into like a whole different world, entry into a whole different world under the ice there.
It's not hard for me to imagine that the electromagnetic situation down there would allow you to fly inside of the Earth and have a whole system of gravity that was different and everything else. Everything's different down there.
It's apparently it's different, but I mean it's the holes are there, and whatever's happening inside is there for people that are part of these projects to go and continue their research and whatever else they're doing. But us civilians are not allowed to even fly over there to see it or to show evidence of it. And there's like quite a lot of evidence that's going on.
So you think there's still giants down there in Antarctica?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And I think that in terms of the giants, I think that, these cases when people go in, 12 go in, 6 come out and say giants, attack them or whatever, they feel threatened. You know what I'm saying? Because they don't feel comfortable living with us on the surface of the planet. So that's why they went under the earth and they established their own colonies and breakaway civilization down there. And so when they encounter us, they feel their existence is threatened. That's why they're, malevolent towards us. That's why they try to kill us off if something like that happens. But I think at this point they just want to be kind of left alone to continue their existence down there and us to continue ours. Obviously, we can't live side by side. That's tried and that didn't work so well. So, but they will continue to be covered up because they are the proof that they have something to do with our ancestry and they have something to do with our creators and not God, the creator,
Right.
one creator, but like our actual physical
So,
creators who created this physical body,
so let me backtrack to the beginning of this whole story because this is where, like, I'm really fascinated and don't have a whole lot of understanding because this is sort of in that deep, murky, gray area where I just never expected to find many answers, so I didn't look. So
Mhm.
you mentioned that Osiris,
Mhm.
you felt like he probably was a real person.
Mhm.
He was one of the Watchers, is what you're saying? One of the
Yeah,
200?
he's kind of his role would be kind of like one of the Anunnaki. He's one of the gods, and that's why the Sumerian gods cross-reference into Egyptian gods, and they cross-reference into the Greek gods. They cross-reference into the Roman gods. And actually, I just wanted to make a point there because I went and I saw the archaeological museum, the museums when I was in Greece, when I was in Egypt. And one thing I got to say is they all depict the gods the same. Like when I was in Greece last year, I was in their national museum, and there's tons of these plaques, right? And the plaques, in all the plaques, it's always the same theme, same motif, which is you have the humans who are about yay tall, and then you have these gods who are literally double the size, and the humans are tending to the gods. And then you take that same idea of the gods literally being double the size of humans. And when I was in Egypt and I'm looking at all these different temple walls and stuff, depictions of Amun Ra, of Thoth, of Osiris, Anubis, all these gods, always the same idea. You have the god who is twice the size of the human, and the human tends to the god. And then you go to Sumerian and our oldest depiction, and you have some of these Sumerian plaques, and you have the same thing. You have the gods twice the size as the humans, and the humans are tending to the gods. And then I can kind of tie into my own dream I had that kind of started my whole interest in this topic years and years ago. And it was I had this dream that there were these beings that lived here thousands and thousands of years ago, and each of them, and they were beings of light. There, I'm still kind of trying to decipher that connection there,
Sure.
but they were massive. They were, like I said, twice our size, and each of them was given a human as their slave to tend to them, and so there was that connection of like these massive beings who created us as slaves to tend to the gods. And then you can tie that into the pyramids, the ziggurats. What was their original purpose? Well, I believe, and lots of other people believe, that the ziggurats were essentially landing pads for these aircraft, for these spaceship aircraft, for these saucers that the gods literally came, landed on, and then these massive beings, extraterrestrials, would come down, walk down the steps, and be greeted by the humans. And the reason why they didn't just land on flat plains, but they landed on these ziggurats, which is the original pyramids, is because the humans didn't like the humans that weren't the priest class or that weren't like directly connected to them. We were their slaves. So essentially, the humans were a slave race. We didn't like them. We didn't like the way they treated us for the most part, right? Other than when we were being given knowledge and stuff like that. So that's why, for their safety, they had to land on these, these pyramid-like structures, the ziggurats, where they felt like the humans weren't going to attack them. And that's essentially where pyramid building began, right? And then pyramid building continued to, other than the ziggurats, you have the Egyptian pyramids and that style pyramid where it's literally a power plant and it's connected in some way to the stars. And I know you want to know where they come from, so I'll tell you what I know. So you have the connections very much to Sirius and the Orion's Belt, and that's the Egyptians. So apparently they're extraterrestrials, the gods. They came from Sirius, and they came from the Orion's Belt area. And the Orion's Belt is literally like a band of 3 stars that projects down to this massive star, Sirius, and apparently that's where those guys came from. Now, what's interesting, you go to Teotihuacan, and I was there last year. I got to say, my favorite place, ancient place I visited. The Teotihuacan three pyramids are built in the same alignment and in the same style, the same arrangement as the three great pyramids. And the Teotihuacan, in Mexico, right north of Mexico City, Teotihuacan means the city of the gods. And it was not, these pyramids were not built by the Aztecs, right? The Aztecs came much later. The Aztecs took claim of that, and they continued the settlement there, but they were built by the gods, hence the name Teotihuacan, which means city of the gods. And it's exactly the same. Those three pyramids, the pyramid of the sun and the moon and Quetzalcoatl in this case, is the same as the three pyramids of Giza. And then, you have, I was reading just recently of the Hopi Indians, and there's a few of their major structures also that align to Sirius. And so Sirius kind of becomes this, where did we come? Okay, if we came from these extraterrestrials, where did they come from? Sirius is mentioned more than Sirius and Pleiades. I think that the Anunnaki apparently come from Pleiades constellation. So you have these two constellations. They're the two major constellations that apparently the gods. Now, keep in mind, there's not just one set of gods, right? There's one set of extraterrestrials. There's various different types, various different races from various different constellations. These two being the most major ones, Pleiades and Sirius.
So you have Syrians.
Yeah, and then Pleiadians. And so even when
Osiris is from Sirius.
Yeah, he's from Sirius. And Pleiades would be Enki and Lil. They're apparently from Pleiades, from the.
So that's interesting. So I never heard that or thought about that they were like two different sets of these
there's
things.
more. There's more because then if you look at the Hindus, right? Now, what's one thing about the Hindu gods that's different than the other gods? Same thing. Tall, much taller gods, literally double the size. But what's different about them? They have different color skin. You have Shiva, blue, Vishnu, blue.
Same as Osiris.
Well, Osiris is green, right? But so there is also the skin tone is a part of it as well. And then the idea of the Pleiadians or the Anunnaki, the Sumerian gods, being they're part reptile, they're reptilians, right?
Which ones
that's
are?
Why the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki would be reptilians. So that's why in their depictions, they're depicted either as a reptile or they're depicted as a bird. But what's interesting is that bird, who's usually holding some like strange man bag. And you find that same depiction of Quetzalcoatl, let's say at La Venta, and Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, also holding his first depiction. He's at La Venta. He's holding also a man bag, and he's this feathered serpent. Again, what's a serpent? A reptile, right? So there's a lot going on, right? But and there's a connection between all these things that, according to our history, never intermingled, right? According to our history, they teach in history books that prior to 1500, when Hernan Cortez came down with the conquistadors to, to attack the Aztecs and just, reform that whole area into Christianity, and literally destroy those empires. They say that there was no contact between the East and the Western world, right? And this is what they teach. But then when you look at these ancient structures, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, the great lung dragon of China, right? It's literally the exact same being, It's and it's always the same mythology that follows that being, which is that this being came from the stars. He came in some kind of flying aircraft. There was usually a trail of smoke, and then they describe it. Smoke, trembling, all this stuff. This is where Eric von Däniken's work comes in. And
well, it's interesting because like the Native Americans, if you read a lot, a lot of their stories and stuff, you'll find in there their stories of these thunderbirds that were like these shining silver birds that would fly overhead and that made this sound like thunder as they flew by.
What is that?
Yeah, I've always found that fascinating, and like I never prompted my kids, but like they like to read the mythology books and stuff we have around the house, and like my kids came running in there one day and they were like, "Dad, what if they're talking about airplanes?" And I was like,
"We're close, right? What if they're talking about spacecraft? Because they can zigzag. They have the propulsion system. They have the, that G-force, and right at the end of the day, right, like."
The Vikings had stories of giants too.
Mm-hmm.
They were correct, the Vikings had stories of giants. I actually have wondered before if like the Vikings had like Midgard and Utgard and whatever else. I forget all the different lands off the top of my
Yeah,
head, but
yeah.
they have these different realms, and but there's 7 of them.
Hmm.
And so it's like you could look at that figuratively and like it's the 7 chakras or something,
Exactly. Yeah.
but at the same time, because everything is everything, hermetically speaking,
Yeah.
and we live in a fractal simulation more or less. Uh, I also think that the seven realms that they're talking about might be like the 7 continents, because they
There's
actually
yeah.
they'll describe in the just go anyone can go Google the 7 realms of Nordic mythology or whatever, and like they describe like the fiery lands of the desert, like down in Egypt, and
Mhm.
the land of the fire giants is what they called it. And
Mhm.
so and then Midgard was like the land of the other giants or whatever. But it's when you look at those descriptions, like there's a lot of talk in Nordic mythology about giants, and some of them were in like a desert place to the south of the Nordic realm, which is
Mhm.
where Egypt is.
Right, right.
Um, and so anyway, yeah, there's just these stories of giants are all over the place. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say that there's no connection between all of these clearly similar things, right? All of these very similar
A lot
stories.
of coincidence.
Yeah, it's like how could it be coincidence though? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I think it's clear that we know giants exist because we excavated them. In terms of
Hmm.
extraterrestrials, I can't say this is irrefutable proof these flesh and blood extraterrestrials exist. I can just give you theories, and then we could say, okay, well, were they interdimensional or were they flesh and blood? Could they phase in and out of reality? Can they come into our 3D reality and then pop back into theirs? I don't know, right? I mean, all these are different theories, but um, if these giants, I think the giants are the link to getting the most credible proof as to who the extraterrestrials were, and because the giants were like massive beings, and we have physical proof of that, I believe that they came and their ancestors were also a massive beings, but b I mean physical beings, right?
Right.
Because I don't think that a non-physical being can impregnate a physical being. I think that that's just against the laws of nature, physics. I don't think it's possible. Like
Yeah.
Mary was not given, Joseph impregnated Mary. If that story is even true about Jesus, we can get into that another time. But you know, he was the son of God, right? He was a prototype of this great
Sure.
Kundalini experience. But she wasn't impregnated by something that's not physical. I don't think that that's possible. Hence, I would have to make the claim that extraterrestrials, the fathers of the giants, were also physical beings. But I don't
Yeah.
have, I don't have some proof that I can. All I
Yeah.
got is
No,
these stories, right?
I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. And for me, the astronomy and astrology, those components of it are what make that the most compelling. I
Right,
always
right.
saw it as, we talked about this before, but like I always just saw it as through some means, probably accidental psychedelic ingestion. I always felt like that some slightly primitive ancestor of humans gained access to some higher state, and their DNA was changed. And so when they gave birth to their next child that they had with their ape husband or whatever, what
Mhm.
came out
Something
was
smarter, something
something
more developed.
smarter, something
Yeah,
something much smarter, right? We've always
right,
met
right.
some really smart, precocious little kid that was like 10 times smarter than their mom and dad put together.
Yeah.
My kids are a good example of that. Um,
The only thing that I will say to that theory is, if that is the case, and we are animals, then why is it that other animals, other than humans, who apparently came from, according to Darwin, came from monkeys and stuff, why is it that other animals are not having those types of experiences, that they're coming out more evolved? Why is it that just that happened once in history, as far as they know, and it happened to us? You know what I'm saying? I would say that there was an intervention. There was an
yeah,
intervention that took place. Maybe, according to your theory, something from not of this realm, something extraterrestrial, something interdimensional, decided, sure, I will give, intelligence to this being, this, monkey-like being, because I like them. They look like us. They walk on 2 feet. So let's have them develop. And it was through something like what you just described. I'll buy that. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? But I believe that an intervention took place. something gave us that experience, or something tinkered with our DNA to start this process of evolution that's been going on for thousands of years, where we are the dominant species. We're literally learning how to live together on this planet, to not destroy it, to not destroy the animals, nature, and all of that. And we're having a hard time, and ourselves in the process. But it's due to intelligence that we obtained in some way, and
You
we
want me to tell
continue.
you? You want me to tell you a really cool story that you've probably never heard that you'll like
Go for it.
a whole lot, and it kind of it gives your idea probably more basis than mine, or more foundation, or more support. It's better evidence for your claim than mine. So there is a there's a tribe of indigenous Native Americans up in your part of the world called the Ojibwe.
Oh, dude, yeah. I know
So
lots
there's
about him, but go on, yeah.
so there's the well, then you might know this story, but so like there's the Ojibwe and like the whole Algonquin, like, or Iroquois Federation, right? There's all
Uh-huh.
those northeastern Native Americans up from New England up into
Mhm.
eastern Canada and stuff like that. Now there is a tribe up there called that's part of that whole federation that speaks Ojibwe and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and the tribe is called the Abenaki.
What? I didn't
And
know that.
and they took their name from these glowing beings that came out of the sky down from the east.
Oh, but
And
Adam, that's a coincidence.
yeah, it's obviously a coincidence.
Right,
So
right?
I've been sitting on this
I
intel.
love that. I didn't know that. I'm gonna research that
So
now. I
you
love
can
that.
look up
That's
Abenaki.
cool.
It's
I'm not
Abenaki. Aben, not like Abe, Naki.
Anunnaki. So literally,
Abenaki.
like Untitled, change a few words, same story. That's
and
crazy. I didn't
and
know that.
so here's what's really neat, is that and I have a book called it's called the Mide Way, Mide way, or Mida way. I don't know, but it's an Ojibwe shamanic sort of compendium, like a little like a documentation thing for the spiritual belief system of the Abenaki and the Ojibwe people. And the reason why it's so fascinating to me is because these Abenaki beings, these glowing, when you hear glowing, I always think of, some sort of, you know,
Angelic or
angelic being
from
or whatever
from up above.
from up
Yeah.
above, descending from the east, which I
Sure,
also
sure.
thought was interesting.
Mhm.
Because also if Atlantis were to sink and it's off in the Atlantic, where would these beings be coming from, right? They would
Yeah.
be coming from the east.
Mhm.
And so anyway, they taught them this secret religion.
Mhm.
And this is what I find really fascinating, is that they taught the people, the Abenaki tribesmen, the Ojibwe and Algonquin and Iroquois, they taught them a secret religion. And when you study this religion, it's insanely similar to Freemasonry.
Wow.
And this is an ancient thing, and it's based on like having the three triptych doorways
Wow. Okay.
in the temple, in the lodge, and it's
Mhm.
actually called the like the medicine lodge.
Wow.
It's called the Grand Medicine Society of the Ojibwe and the Abenaki.
Mhm.
And it's really fascinating for anyone who's like sort of read a little bit about Freemasonry and about the way that the ceremony works and the way that they pass down knowledge through that society. Um, you have if you trace that information far enough back, if you trace Freemasonry far enough back, you tend to run into these sort of Anunnaki bloodlines and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a
the
big
royal
part of
bloodlines of
Freemasonry.
ancient Sumeria and Egypt and all of that.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I thought you'd find that fascinating. And
Oh,
what
the name itself just gives it away.
it's crazy. And what I find really fascinating is that, in all of my studies about Native Americans, it's clear that, they've always been pretty much obliterated,
Yeah.
by the, European culture. But in particular, the Ojibwe were like the targets of a genetic, like a genocide, the likes of which I've never read about anything like this happening, but like early 1900s, I mean, very
Mhm.
recently, 1920, 1930, 1940, they were still massively targeting that particular tribe of people to eliminate their DNA.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I
I
think
didn't
that's,
know that.
yeah, they were sterilizing the kids, they were killing the kids, they were killing the old people. it seemed like there was a targeted, and you can read about like the specific eugenic targeting of the Ojibwe people. And so I just always think about like the Abenaki, the Ojibwe people. They got this knowledge from these glowing beings that come down from the sky out of the east. They teach them this secret religion, and then thousands of years later, whenever Western culture comes back around and realizes who they're dealing with, they're like, "Holy shit, we got to
That's
do
what it is. And
we
let's
got to get
of
rid of
these
their
guys.
DNA. We got to get
Yeah.
rid of these guys." You
You know,
know,
it's interesting. I actually mentioned the Ojibwe. Last year, I was in Petroglyphs Park, and it has the Ojibwe teaching rocks. And it's the first time I saw petroglyphs like in person. And because I was very interested in petroglyphs for a long time, because this is the depiction of our natives, of what they saw, what they had contact with. And what's interesting is that it's picturesque forms. So they draw these, different forms and things. And what's interesting about these teaching rocks, and I was fascinated by it, and it could be related to what you were just saying, again, it was the same depiction. It's always the same thing. You have the human being depicted, and then you have some being behind, or that's descending from the sky, and that being is always twice as big as the human. It's got some kind of strange different head, some antenna or something like that, like the Hopi Indians. They call them the ant people, and it's always the same story. They're descending from the sky, and they're teaching humans, and then they ascend back in the sky. And it could be, a reference to what you were saying, because that's what the Anunnaki essentially were, right?
yeah,
They came to the sky, civilized us, and then left, right? And it's everywhere, and it's all these different petroglyphs all over the world. They're showing the same depictions, and one just has to kind of connect the dots, you know what I mean? And you get like an interesting story here, that a narrative that's not being taught in school or anything like that. But when you see so much of it, and when you see it in person as well, it's like irrefutable claims that there's something there, and that there were some beings, real or not, physical or not, that we have a connection to, that civilized us, and they gave us knowledge, and then they left and let
yeah,
us fend for ourselves. And that's been the case now for quite a while. We've been fending for ourselves, and sadly not doing a good job. Hopefully it'll pick up.
yeah. I was always curious as a kid, like why the royal family, like all the different royal families and stuff, why they always wanted to keep their marriages and their bloodlines and
But
preserve.
that's it, right? And
But
we
if you
should
have,
also, if we're gonna talk about the Giants, we gotta get into the elongated heads. I
yeah, oh
think
yeah, for
that's
sure.
we can't
Well,
we
so
can't
yeah,
miss out on that, because I have some
I
stuff here
almost
that I
skipped
want to
right
show
over
you
it.
as well, related to when I was in Egypt. Let me show you a couple artifacts I got.
Yeah,
Elongated heads. In this case, it's our boy Akhenaten, the first monotheist in history, and he is depicted like this. All right, look at
yeah,
that. That's from Egypt. And so these elongated heads are found all over the place, and in some way they're connected to A, the giants, B, the royal bloodline, right? And C, extraterrestrials, beings from outer space. And then check out King Tut, Tutankhamun.
yeah,
That's Look at that.
yeah,
And then you have this guy's wife, is it Nefertari or Nefertiti? And I mean, no, that's him. But I have her in the other room. And also, she's got that big, right? That's where they get the idea of these giant headgear that even the Pope wears, right? He's got that giant headgear, which is like a Dogon fish, which again connects to, there was something back in the day, priest class. The priest class had elongated heads, but they didn't want the other humans to know. So they covered it up with headgear. That's where you get the idea of these giant, even like royalty. What did they wear? The top hats, right? And they
yeah.
cover up the idea of covering up what's behind the head there, so you don't see the elongated skull.
Well, I will say that like you can go look at like the ceremonial like priest garb for like the Sumerians and the Babylonian priesthood and stuff like that, and it's the exact same gear that the Pope is wearing today.
Yeah, it's the Dogon hat. That's a Dogon. Sorry, not Dagon.
Dagon,
Dagon. Yeah, it's
the Dagon
the
fish hat.
Apkallu, the fish head. There were seven of them, the Apkallu, and they came to civilize humanity. They were apparently sent by Enlil, I think, story something like that. And again, civilizer deity. They came. They the fish head, which means that they survived the flood, right? Anything that you see with the
I always
fish
wonder
is
where that came from, the fish
yeah.
head.
Well,
That's what you're thinking.
it means that they survived the flood. So they're either of Atlantean origin, they're pre-Adamites, which that's another term for these guys, pre-Adamites, meaning they came literally before Adam. Yeah, they had took part in creating Adam and Eve, right, in the Garden of Eden. And so they're shown with the mitre head, right? So the mitre hat of the Pope is literally like the Daegu priest, is it called? I forget, Dogon Daegu.
Dagon, I think, is
Yeah,
Dagon.
but again, then the Dagon is connected to who? The Dogon, right? Then the Dogon tribe has also a similar story in their tradition as well of ancestors beings, coming from the stars, and and it's everywhere, right? Something you get so much of this information, you start confusing one with the other. The words are so similar, and you start to realize, holy shit, they're all talking about the same. They all had similar encounters, you know? Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The mitre hat of the Pope. Exactly. So you see Babylon, right? Assyria, right? So the idea is that these beings, the Apkallu, they survived the flood. And so they're shown with the fish because what's one, a fish can survive water, right? It can survive the flood. So that's to show that lineage. But then you see the Pope, of the Dagon, yeah, and the fish god of Babylon. So you see then the Pope is related to that. He's kind of a descendant of those beings. They were priest kings, right? So who's a Pope? The Pope is a priest, but he also has kingship over, um, over us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's really crazy stuff because there's to me, like, the reason why all this stuff matters, in addition to the fact that it connects us to our origins, is also that understanding all this stuff and understanding why it was covered up will lead you to understanding who's calling the shots now,
Right. Right.
and why things are, why things are in the state that they're in, for
Mhm.
better or worse, why things
Exactly,
are
right?
going the way they're going, and there's stuff like the Catholic Church seeing the Pope wearing this outfit that is exactly the same outfit that Babylonian priests were wearing 5,000 years ago during, like, ritual child sacrifice
They're trying to
ceremonies.
say something, they're saying something. They're continuing
Yeah,
a lineage of something.
they're continuing a lineage of something. And then if there's a lineage there that's been preserved so well that the Pope is still wearing the same damn hat that these guys were wearing 5,000 years ago, that's a pretty well preserved lineage.
Hmm.
And you can start to understand the psychology of the kinds of people that feel the need to preserve that lineage as closely as they do.
And
And
not tell us about it, right? They don't want
right,
us knowing there's all these hidden things that we don't know about. But when you look into the occult and in history and all this stuff we're talking about, you make the connection. But then you say, well, wait a second, why aren't they out in the open about it? Well, because that's part of it's like a ritual. The whole thing is a ritual. Their control over us right now is a ritual that's been going on for thousands and thousands of years. It's just that it's no longer in the open because we rebelled at some point in time, and they don't want us to rebel. They want us to continue having control. So they have these rituals and things that they perform through celebrities and things like that, and they through the media, and that's how they maintain control. But they're still in their minds. They're still they're still the descendants of Cain. They're still the descendants of the Anunnaki. In their minds, they are superior to us. They're gods, but they're not going to tell it to you. They're going to be behind the scenes and call the shots and put people in power that we think are leading the countries and all that, but they're not. They're pawns behind these people who control everything. The Illuminati. Anyways, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole right now. But the Giants leads right into the Illuminati. The Canaanites, the bloodlines of Cain, the bloodline of Lucifer. They believe that they're the bloodline of Lucifer. And they are still calling the shots. They're still God kings. You know, Boom. Is that a real
so
picture of that?
that
Is that
that's a real
Rockefeller or
no.
Rothschild?
This is a picture of Jacob Rothschild for anyone who's
Rothschild.
watching on YouTube.
Holy shit, dude! Is that real?
That's real, 100%. That's why I pulled it up.
Holy crap! I
We're
didn't
t-
see that.
we're talking about elongated heads here, and this
Oh
being
my word!
this is a physical characteristic of these bloodlines of the Anunnaki. of the bad people who run the world. And then here we have probably, arguably, the most powerful, if not certainly one of the top two or three most powerful people on the planet, is Jacob
Yep, yep,
Rothschild,
yep, yep.
who owns all of the central banks on the planet pretty much. He prints the money for the United States, for England, for everybody in Europe. I mean, these guys are have more money than anyone you could. They don't show up on the Forbes richest 500 list because they don't want to be on there.
Oh, this guy's been running the show for, for a very, very long time.
Yeah,
Him,
his family's
Rockefeller.
been running stuff for hundreds of years, but
Yeah,
their lineage has been doing this for thousands of years.
yeah,
And
yeah, and they're
Akhenaten,
connected there to the Nazis, and it's all one giant cover up, and one giant power struggle, and they're still reenacting these rituals. They're still. I mean, we don't have to go down that path. We can, but they're still involved in the occult, and we don't know it.
So
You know.
to do another throwback to Michael Tsarion, so anyone who wants to look him up, Michael Tsarion, and he did a breakdown. This guy's so thorough and so detailed, but he did a breakdown using like ancient Sumerian text, and he had like this ceremony that was on a temple wall or something in Babylon. And then he showed the queen's coronation ceremony from like 1952 when she became queen.
Yeah.
And there's video of the ceremony. And then he shows step by step the ritual of this sort of tarot and astrology driven ceremony of the Babylonian fish kings and queens.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows that ceremony. And then step by step, he breaks down the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth. And it's fucking step by step. It's the same thing.
It's the same. It's
a cult ceremony by the same bloodlines of people who've been in power in these different families throughout different dynasties throughout the history of the world, all going back apparently to this lineage of giant elongated headed humanoids.
The Nephilim. We have the Nephilim, and then we have their fathers, the fallen angels, the Watchers, which is literally the gods. We have the gods, and then we have the demigods. Keep in mind, the Nephilim are the demigods. They were the god kings, right? But the pagan gods are the actual extraterrestrials. They're the Anunnaki. They're the Egyptian gods.
So you'd have like Hercules and Achilles and stuff like that. You think that they were Nephilim?
Yes, exactly. So you have in Greece especially, Zeus loves to come down. Have sex with human women. Same story. Out of these sexual encounters come superior beings from Achilles, Hercules, name them all. And these guys have special powers. Some are larger than others. Some are not. Some are just have incredible strength. Some are immortal, like invincible, or nearly invincible, like Achilles, right? And so there's always the same story being brought down from generation to generation in different traditions, right? And it's all literally all these major, ancient civilizations. They tell the same story over and over, just different characters, different plots, but the same meanings, to this day.
Crazy. Yeah. It's incredible, man. The Giants thing is super cool to me. Anybody who's interested in the giant stuff, you can Google just almost anything and go follow the rabbit holes where they go. But there's, like I said, there's microfilm for newspapers. Just go pick any random town throughout the United States, particularly that
I think the Southwest. There's a lot in the Southwest.
Southwest, particularly.
Yeah.
Well, dude, you'd be blown away. Like, so we had this road trip planned up to Ohio this summer until things went weird with the whole coronavirus thing. But there's like Moundville, Mississippi, I think, or Alabama. But anyway, it's all up the Mississippi River Valley up into Ohio, and there's countless Indian mounds they've found that have giants in them. And I always thought that like the Southwest and all that stuff was where all of it was. Certainly, it's if you want to go see the cliff palaces and all that stuff of Mesa Verde and everything, like that stuff's all beautiful.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that's on my list of things. In fact, as soon as all this stuff calms down, when I go down to the States, boom, I'm going to the Mesa Verde National Park. the Four Corners region,
Yeah.
you got to come by, man. We should organize something.
No, we'll definitely hook up down there because
There's a lot going on there, man. Many sites, many sites.
Yeah, we've been all over that place. I don't know if we've been to every single site, but we've been to a couple dozen
so you've
sites.
been there, yeah.
And they're amazing, man. They're really really amazing because you see the way that they built things. You see the alignments that there are to things that you're there, and the tour guides have no idea, right? It's like just some
Never
freshman
listen
college
to the
kid.
tour guide. That's one thing I learned. Yeah,
Some freshman college kid that's like, trying to tell you how they're making concrete for 45 minutes. And I'm like, man, there's a lot more cool shit here to talk about than how they made the mortar for their fucking bricks.
Yeah.
But no, we'll definitely hook up on that. There's lots of cool stuff to look at. And then up in like the Ohio, I said Mississippi, but I meant the Ohio River Valley. There's a lot of crazy stuff. Like, this will blow a lot of people's minds and probably won't make sense to a lot of people, but it's true and it's crazy. But like the Egyptian influence in Ohio and New England
telling me about that.
is strong. It's really strong. And there are even things like the Hamza hand, people know about the Hamza hand, where you got like the eye of God in the middle of the hand. Like, that's a Mississippian like Native American symbol.
Wow.
And then you find it in India from thousands of years ago. And just the names, the words, the language, all that stuff is
the meanings are the same, right? Just how did it end up there, right? Like,
all of the ancient Gaelic and Irish, and this is coming from Michael Tessarian, but like ancient Gaelic, Celtic, Irish, and then ancient Greek are almost identical. And then all of the Iroquois language from like the eastern part of the U.S. is also almost identical. And so again, it's not hard to imagine how if there was some big, beautiful island in the middle of the Atlantic where people were sailing off west to go to America, and they were sailing off east to go to Europe, to Greece, to Ireland, all the way in through the Mediterranean up to Egypt, all over the northwestern coast, like of Morocco and stuff. We're at northwestern Africa. There would have been a diffusion from that central island where people would have traded and had vacation homes or had trade routes and their language, potentially children and lineage and bloodline, all would have gone to those places. And the more I looked into that, the more I realized that Jesus Christ, they have to keep this stuff hidden. They have to, because it what it tells us is that people were so connected back then, and we were connected through a common belief system and a common sense of spirituality and a common understanding of the cosmos. And what I see when I look back that far in history at that connectivity that we had is, and Tessarian talks about this too, for instance, the Aryan people, we think of as like white Nazi people, but that's really comes from northern India. There's all this other stuff. But the point is, Tessarian makes the case that, and I think very well, that the Aryan people had nothing to do with their skin color. It had nothing to do with their race. These were people of a certain mindset, a certain level of enlightenment, as people who were considered sort of enlightened people. And you don't want, if you're in the business of keeping people fighting each other, you don't want them to think that, they could transcend all the skin color and all of
together in peace and harmony.
You got to keep them fighting with each other. I would recommend everybody look into Michael Tessarian's Irish Origins of Civilization, with the one caveat that I do think that ultimately his conclusion's just off by one step. He's got a lot of that Irish, a lot of Irish nationalism going on, but the information's still good. You just got to push past his ceiling, the glass ceiling of Ireland was it. It's like, no, it was Atlantis, and it was all of these things. Ireland has no special claim to any of this shit. It's the Atlantean unified origins, and all of that stuff too. But anyway, man, we're up on 2 hours now. I think this has been a fucking action-packed
cool, man.
Conversation as always.
And we stuck to the topic this time. We did the Giants, so I'm proud of us for this. We usually go off on way different topics.
Dude, I was nervous. JC's not here, and I was like, man, if JC's not here, how are we going to keep this thing on the rails? Because Nevin and I have very little chance. But we did it.
No, actually, well, it's good, and it's good that we do it this way, let's say. And you tell me beforehand, okay, let's talk just magic, and let's talk, Hermeticism, one podcast, and let's talk Kundalini, and let's talk Eastern spirituality, and this time we're talking giants, and that way we're kind of staying in the same ballpark of, topics and things.
Well, it's good because it makes it where people, whenever they want to listen, when they go look up a video, and it's
Right,
like,
yeah.
it's
I want to
hard
listen
put
about this. Boom, put that on.
Yep, it's hard to put on to even come up with a title for some of the shit the conversations we've had because
we're going on tangents, right? I'm talking Kundalini here, then Hermeticism, then giants, then boom, And
But
less
you know
work
what?
for you to have to cut it up, right? This way, you just throw it on, and cool. We got a whole
Well,
2
yeah,
hours.
I'll get to release this one before any of the other stuff
I
comes
had
out.
a feeling you were going to say that. Yeah,
this one's liable to
just
come out
throw it
next
on.
week. Yeah, but I love it. And for anyone listening to this, we've been having conversations with Nevin, because I guess you're probably going to hear this episode first, but we've been having conversations with Nevin that have been just absolutely incredible, deep conversations about Enochian magic, about Kundalini, the chakras, about astrology, about Hermeticism, and all kinds of stuff. So like this has been, I don't know, our third or fourth conversation. These things run several hours a piece.
Yeah, it's usually longer.
Yeah.
2 to 3 hours.
Yeah,
but now we're just doing one topic, so that's good. I feel like, okay, I can't think of anything else giants related that I can share. Maybe one or two things, but nothing major. Most of it's out there, so that's good.
Yeah. As long as we can get it out there, man. Well, as always, dude, I appreciate it very much. And
yeah, I love this, man. I'm here anytime. Yeah.
Yeah. So let everybody know again where to find you, since this episode's going to go out first. Let everybody know.
Sure. Yes, so my website is www.nevenpar.com. That's NEVENPAAR.com. And I spent a lot of time communicating with people through Instagram, which you can also link that on my website. But on Instagram, I'm at, my link is at Winged Shoes Publishing, which is my publishing company. So it's again at Winged Shoes Publishing. Yeah.
Yep, and that's winged, like
Winged.
with an ed. Winged Shoes Publishing, like the Greek god Hermes. Or
let me show you where the inspiration behind that is. Wow, I can also show you my tattoos on my feet, but winged
I love it.
Shoes.
Winged shoes. There we go.
And to show you my level of commitment, show you.
Now I got, look at that.
I got my wings.
Winged
I got my
foot.
wings on all my feet here.
I dig
Hermes.
it, man.
Hermes.
I need to get, now I got to get wing tattoos on my feet. But maybe not. That shit seems like it could be painful.
It was a good 6 hours, 4 wings on each side.
Yeah.
But I've been meaning to do it. That's my patron god, my inspiration, my inspiration on this whole journey, since my Kundalini awakening to getting into the Golden Dawn, to learning about Hermeticism, the Kabbalion. It's always been one central figure. It's been Hermes, Thrice Majestus, Hermes, Mercury, Thoth, the Greek, Egyptian, Roman god. And so that's my inspiration behind all of my work and learning about all this stuff. It's all been Hermes, man.
Do you ever see my tattoo on my upper arm?
No, or unless you maybe showed me last time. Oh, dude, there you go. The moon god Thoth. I love that. That's amazing. I want it. Oh, nice. You got the eye of horse. Beautiful. Awesome, dude. I love it. You got great tattoos.
Yeah, man. That's it. And then we got a...
I see the stuff back there. Oh, yeah. I got my...
back here behind us.
I got my Thoth back here, even though, dude, we'll have to do a showing of all my statues. I literally I collect them. I've spent thousands of dollars. I've decided to include Buddha here, but I got statues of every god and goddess from every religion, and
I love it. There. Yeah, we're all about inclusivity around here. If I can find a god that I can resonate with, that like has stories about him that I enjoy, or that in some way, to me, really the gods have always been a reflection of internal characteristics of the human condition, and whenever you venerate these different gods, it venerates those certain aspects.
You embody their powers.
You embody their powers within you, right? So it's, to me, it's the more gods you can find to have a relationship with and understand, the better. So that's kind of how we operate too, man.
Amazing.
Well, I appreciate it very much, dude. As always, and we'll do this again.
Thank you.
And for everybody listening and watching, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys have enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. And again, we've got a lot more coming with Nevin and with JC and myself, and we're kind of chopping these up and editing these to give you guys different information on different topics that you're interested in. So make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure you stick around for that stuff. You don't want to miss out. I promise, it's really good shit. And then share this stuff with your friends, and make sure that we get get some love. If you don't mind, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a comment, and give us some ratings on the different platforms, whatever it is that you're listening on, like iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, whatever. But I think that without being an expert in the algorithms and how they work, I think that we get some pretty major bumps and like boosts and bonuses to the algorithm if you leave comments and ratings and stuff. So please do that, even if it's really simple. Also, any questions that you have, if you got any questions that you want us to address with any one of our friends that we do any podcasts with, we have access to everybody. I can ask Nevin questions if you got questions for Nevin. If you got questions for us, ask us. And other than that, you guys can find us on wayfinderpodcast.com. And from there, you can link to any other platform that you want to listen to: YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, whatever. And of course, we're on Instagram, one of my favorite places to communicate, just Wayfinder Podcast. And that's going to be all for today with Giants, with Nevin Parr, with me, Adam, here at Wayfinder. May the light be with you, may peace be within you, and may you be a sun on the paths of all men. Peace out, guys.
Looks. That's it. Let there be light.
All right, that's it, dude.